Welcome! In this video, we're going to talk about Ssangsu Geombup Ilban Part 2. Usual disclaimer, again, I'm using this uniform in particular, again, because the form itself is canonical, but my interpretations of it and the many things I want to add to it are not, right? So it felt disingenuous to be wearing a Federation uniform while also saying some of this stuff is not fully canonical, so all that fun stuff. But with that, let's take a look at our next part of the form, right? So last we left off, we had our happy little center cut here, we turned, and we did a right cut going the direction we just came from. But from here, let's keep going. So from, bop. Those of you who know the form, this is a very simple one, right? So it is very similar to the beginning portion form. Now instead of center cuts, we're both incorporating a non-right foot forward, right? So again, generally introducing newer ideas. Again, this is why I really like Federation forms. So in the beginning of the form, we only had our right foot forward as we moved forward with our strikes. Now we're going to be using alternating steps. So in, this is why it's no longer canonical. I'm going to use terminology that I just like to use because I happen to know it, right? So Suriashi, at least from Kendo, is with our right foot forward. But with Aimiyashi, we're switching our feet this way. Now, the reason why I like that they introduced this pretty early is it's going to be using our alternating footwork. So one reason I like the Aimiyashi, right, so the ability to be able to strike from either foot forward, right, is first of all, it does make it quite different from Kendo, for example. So most of the time, unless you're fighting someone who's in Jodan, most of the time you're going to be fighting someone who's just like you with the right foot forward and both of you are in middle guard. So I like that Gumdo does this essentially immediately, right? So you learn how to move with just one foot and now you're going to start to use alternating footwork. So I really enjoy that, and one thing we kind of do with that, right, is so obviously this is not how it is in the form, and we don't see this in a form for a very long time. However, by having our alternating footwork, we can also start to move on angles, right? So notice as I'm going on these angles, I'm using our new left and right cuts, because if I did do a center cut while mid-motion, going on an angle, it might make contact and then kind of veer off slightly, right? Versus if I'm cutting with my motion, so for example, if I'm moving to my left, I'm doing a right cut. This is actually a quite nice footwork, very fluid, very useful, just kind of moving around a target. Additionally, by including our left and right cuts, again, essentially immediately, is it gives you a lot more room for use, right? So if we're sparring and both of us only use center cuts, it really limits what we can do, right? Especially if we do both use middle guard here. If we both go in for that double step center cut, for example, we're either going to get stabbed or we're just going to clash into each other, which is a very big Kendo problem, right? But if we start moving, at least obviously on angles would be better, but even just being able to strike on angles, which is a thing in Kendo as well, I'm aware of Sayomen, right? But this also lets you move around their sword to aim for the wrist, for example. So by unlocking our left and right cuts, we also unlock other potential target areas. Those target areas being, right, so our wrists, right? So by moving around a sword, especially again with a step on an angle, moving around the sword to strike a wrist, for example, is really useful. Additionally, by going into our left-right strikes, you can aim for like the sides of the head, or sides of the neck, right? So like jugular strikes, as well as temple strikes, as well as also just catching someone on the shoulder, elbow, gives you a lot more space to work with. Now, a detail that I want to play with a little bit with these left-right cuts is a little bit on the nitpicky side, right? So first I'll ask, like, okay, if we just cut with our left strike, do I just bring it straight up, right, to prepare for the next one? Do I need to go back the way I came to do the next one? like which one of those two do you expect, right? Because when you look at a form, now this is something that's very, very nitpicky and virtually no masters really talk about this, right? If I'm here, bring it straight back, it doesn't inherently look wrong or anything like that, and it to a certain degree depends on what your target area was. But let's assume that that cut was effective and actually made contact, right? If I actually were able to cut into someone with this left cut, the cut is along this angle. If I try to push it up this way, there's a body. there's a body right there, right? Additionally, even if I was aiming for the wrist, right? If I slash through there, I go straight up this way, their other hand or their sword might still be there. So that's also hard for me to, again, get out. So I recommend, as you're striking in, as you're preparing for the next strike, follow the same angle back and then move into your next strike. And while we're on the detail train, right? So our prep work, right? So from here, if I were able to cut, I'm getting ready for my next one. Do I start hands over head, and as I'm getting ready to cut, switch at the last moment to meet that angle? Or am I here, over, and cut? So one of these is very Gumdo, one of these is very Kendo, right? So Kendo, you're up here, and then last moment, turn. Up here, last moment, turn. The idea behind that is, if I'm here, it's very telegraphed where I'm striking, right? It's here, and I have that angle, right? It's very obvious what I'm cutting. Versus if I'm up here, I turn last moment, it could have been a center cut, it could have been a left cut, it could have been a right cut, a lot harder to discern. However, there are some pros and cons of each, right? It is harder to have that perfect edge alignment if I'm cutting and I kind of turn last moment. Can it still work? Sure. It's just not as likely to work, especially as early as white belt. Again, white belt is someone who's just picked up the sword and first couple weeks trying to swing it, trying to get used to our new left and right cuts, right? Versus by having that full shift over, yes, it's telegraphed. It is also a lot easier to maintain that edge alignment. It is also easier to have more consistent power, right? So you're going to have power in both of them. I find that it's a lot more consistent by switching first, right? However, this is a little bit more of a stylistic perspective. Again, if you want to be more in tune with the Federation, they do want to see more of that shift. If you want to be more sparring oriented and not care as much about edge alignment, which should not be mutually exclusive, but however, in this case, they sort of are, I would recommend the overhead and then last moment switch. And something in the body mechanics arena of this, right, is I believe we talked about kind of using the glute to kind of push yourself forward with this one. Now, noticing as we're alternating our footwork, I'm going to activate the lead leg glute to push myself forward and bring it back in. Again, the one that's leading, push forward and bring it back in. So this is now working, again, the glutes again. So originally, if I'm just sliding forward, my back glute is the one that pushes forward. If I'm alternating, I'm going to be using, again, the lead leg to push forward. Now, in future forms, I believe this is a generically true statement, we're going to be alternating our feet a lot more, right? So it's pretty rare for us to kind of keep sliding forward. It's going to look like something with, for example, diagonal cuts right here. We're alternating our feet. So it's introducing you the idea of, again, activating that correct glute and learning how to alternate which ones to use in order to propel yourself forward. And last idea is very similar to what we ended with the last one, right? So if I'm in someone's body for that second set, right? So first set, center cuts. Last set is going to be right-left cuts. From here, moving in this direction, what you can do is just be like, meh, right? Very, very meh, right? Versus here, again, if I was successful, my sword is, again, in a body or just past my target area, even if I was able to dislodge it, I want to maintain the tip there essentially as long as is reasonable, right? Because either it's embedded or I'm trying to move effectively in this new direction by keeping the passive shield here, right? Because again, just in case, just because you struck someone doesn't mean they're not able to strike back, which is the ideal case, but yeah. From here, so instead of just pulling it back and going in a new direction, keep that tip there, using the translation of your body in this direction to power up the tip moving from here all the way around, right? This should power up your cut. This should not feel like a reset. From here, turning, again, sliding with it here and using that turn to get a little more power, right? So from another angle, just in case this helps, right? So from here, again, translating here, moving here. And again, from here, translating, I'll do it this way so you can actually see with the blade work, translating here, and as it moves, pop. There we have it. A little bit more for us to think about with regard to Form 1. Form 1 is by far the most simple form that we have. However, again, I love the progression of it. Again, they're always building up as they're developing the form, right? Again, we started off just right foot forward, center cuts, work on specific glute activation. We expand our knowledge by alternating our feet, alternating our cuts, getting a little bit more, and now using our body's translation as we're getting out of range of something to power up another cut. So a lot of interesting ideas that we kind of play with, as well as, again, ideas that we're going to be implementing and growing in future forms. But with that, make sure you stay safe, stay humble, and keep training.